There we go. I'd like to thank everyone once again for attending today's webinar, Know What Works, How Testing Can Save You Time, Increase Conversions, and Improve Morale. I'm Charlene Pine McManus. I'm a recent addition to the Ironworks marketing team. I've got 15 years of experience on the client side and understand the challenges that organizations face when working with digital marketing tools and measuring success. So this particular topic is near and dear to me personally. Ironworks has partnered with Sitecore today to introduce you to the basics of utilizing testing on your website to increase conversions, and to demonstrate how Sitecore's customer engagement platform can simplify testing and measurement. Before we get started, I'll give a little background on Ironworks. Ironworks is a project-based consulting company with one mission: never fail a client. We measure our success by the success of our clients. Ironworks provides integrated strategies and solutions to help our clients succeed. We started in Richmond in 2001 and have since expanded to nearly 300 full-time employees, serving clients from offices in the Metro DC area, Raleigh and Charlotte, North Carolina, and we recently made a push out west with the opening of an office in Minneapolis. Ironworks clients include national, global, and Fortune 500 companies, in addition to nonprofits and government agencies. We serve a variety of industries with a special emphasis on healthcare, government, financial services, manufacturing, retail, and distribution, as well as nonprofits and associations. Ironworks offers 3 core services: business and IT alignment, where we develop practical strategies to help clients improve their business performance. This is our consulting arm. Portal and content management, where we're building internet-based systems to share content, knowledge, and data. And to date, we've completed over 150 successful content management implementations. Our interactive department is busy developing creative ideas and engaging audiences through web, mobile, and social media. So those are all things front-facing with your website. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Geoff Harper.
Okay. Thank you, Charlene. Good morning, everybody. As the title of the webinar indicated, we'll be talking about some of the advantages of introducing testing to your web content design process. We'll be doing that. I'll be speaking for a bit about some of the advantages that you can reap from introducing testing into your process. We'll also have Peter Fogelfanger from Sitecore giving us a brief demo of their product and how it can be used to actually conduct some testing. So I'll jump in first. And I think first of all I want to say that having a culture of optimization is a good idea for any company that has a website that has a significant role in the company's strategic plan or in their value proposition. The benefits to conversion and optimization of marketing expenditures can be significant. But for the purposes of this webinar, we'll not just be focusing on those conversion benefits, we'll also be focusing on some of the more structural benefits of adopting testing into your culture and into your process. A lot of that comes down to how decisions are made within organizations. So why is it so difficult to make the right decision? We're going to go through a couple of scenarios that you may or may not be able to relate to. These are based on my experience in being in different organizations and how decisions are made. And these represent some common barriers to being able to make the right decision. We'll start off with a couple of characters, with Jim, who's a marketing analyst, and Chuck, who's a product manager. In this situation, Jim is responsible for the analytics and reporting for his company's website. As any good analyst, he's been looking for correlations to conversion, and he finds one. He finds that customers that are looking at the reviews of their products are more likely to convert to a purchase of those products. And as a result of that, he wants to recommend that they look at changing the product page so that the review and rating information shows up closer to the top of the page and it's presented more prominently. Makes sense. Chuck, on the other hand, is a product manager, and Chuck wants to increase conversion, but he also has to make sure that the products that he's responsible for are converting at a high level, not just for the entire company. But his interests are a little bit different. And he's concerned that while offering the ratings information more prominently for some products will result in higher conversion for those products, if there are any products that may not have as high a rating, that it could affect their conversion adversely. And so he's not necessarily on board with the idea of making the ratings more prominently than they are today. Okay. Another common situation, you've got a couple of interactive designers that are a part of a company's website team. In this situation, you've got Jill and Derek. They've both been working on a landing page project. They've both come up with a couple of options. And they've got 4 viable solutions for landing pages that can be used for their search marketing efforts. That's great, but now there's a concern that the company doesn't know which one to go with. And both Jill and Derek think that the ones they've come up with are the better options, but even within the ones they've come up with, they both think they're viable options. So you've got 4 options now without a clear idea of which one would actually result in the highest conversion. Finally, we have Carla, who is a merchandising specialist for her company's website, and she's really been working on some of the merchandising rules and search rules that are responsible for presenting products on her company's e-commerce website. She actually thinks she's come up with some really cool stuff. It's based on solid consumer research, and she's been able to make the changes throughout the year to the site. Unfortunately, because those changes have been made across the entire site, she doesn't have a good way to figure out how much benefit the work that she did has had, how that's contributed to the bottom line of the company. Compounding that is that you have other folks within her organization that are doing the same thing. They're focusing on different marketing initiatives, or they're making changes to the user experience throughout. So even if she could look at one period of time versus another, she's not going to be able to tell with any degree of certainty how much impact the changes she made really had on the site. So what's common about each of these different scenarios? It really comes down to the decision making and how decisions are made and who's involved in making different decisions on the site. And there's a few specific things that are affecting these particular scenarios. Decision ownership within an organization, so who ultimately gets to decide what changes get made to a site, who decides on prioritization. We also saw a situation where you had multiple viable solutions to a single design challenge, but no real way to determine which one would offer the highest conversion. And finally, we don't always have very good data to guide decisions or to prove value of something. And that can be really frustrating, because if you're trying to justify an investment, or if you're just trying to decide whether to go with option A or option B, if you don't have good data backing it up, if you don't have a way to say for certain which one is going to work best for the particular objective that you have, there's a high probability that you're going to make the wrong decision. Let's jump into those a little bit more. Why do those things exist? Well, in today's organizations, websites usually have multiple stakeholders and decision makers. You don't just have that centralized leadership that's responsible for making the decisions and deciding on prioritization for a specific site. This ultimately means you'll need more time and a good diplomacy to get any kind of consensus. Adding to that, what you'll often find is that your interests won't be aligned with some of your stakeholders or even some of your other teammates, meaning you'll have to face off against them. This doesn't foster a collaborative environment. Again, it takes time, and you ultimately may have to make some painful compromises to get anything done. We also find that there's lots of different solutions to a design problem these days. With sites becoming more complex and with so many great ideas out there, it's possible, even likely, that your team is going to have more than one way that they want to approach a particular design solution. If you don't have a fair and objective way to choose that best option, you're not only risking making a bad decision, but you're also risking potentially hurting the feelings of the people whose designs aren't chosen, and that can affect your morale. Finally, when it comes to imperfect data, there's never perfect data to make a decision, but too often we tend to rely on opinion or gut to make important decisions. And sometimes that can be okay. If you have a lot of experience, you can usually tell what will work or what won't. But that's still not ideal. You'd still like to have data backing up a decision. And when we make changes without a way to accurately measure the impact of those changes, we're losing the opportunity to justify that change, which can affect future funding decisions and prioritization. The good news is that you can use testing to address these particular scenarios and to help with your decision making within your organization. So we'll spend now just a few minutes going over the basics of testing, and then we'll get into some real examples about how testing has helped a particular organization. So just as a quick overview, in simple terms, testing on the web is a way to run controlled experiments to assess the relative performance of different changes to your site. The way that this works is that your visitors are randomly assigned into different groups where they see either a test version of the content or they see the original version but are tracked as a control visitor. And then the performance of those different groups are compared. When coupled with the right data collection and analytics tools, these experiments can be really powerful in helping you to figure out what's really the best option to go with, and how much of a best option is that? How much of a gain are you going to get? And it can help you to understand not just the what, but the why behind that. Why is something performing better? Typically, there's two different types of tests, and we'll look at these two. There are some variations on these, but I'll keep it high level. And those are A/B testing, A/B split testing, and multivariate tests. For A/B split tests, these are the most common type. They tend to be a little bit easier to run and to measure. They typically involve changes to a single element within a page, and as you can see here, it's designed to just change one variable. It's a single variable. Now, you can still have multiple versions of something. You can have, we sometimes refer to it as ABC or ABCDE testing, where you can vary that one element many times if you have lots of different solutions. But the idea with A/B testing is you want to just focus on a single point that you're going to vary for that particular test. Now, multivariate testing is similar in that you're conducting the experiment in a very similar way. You're assigning people into those test groups, and they're seeing some variation of what you're trying to test. But the difference is that you have multiple variables. You have multiple pieces of content that are changing. So as you add in different elements of the page that are changing, you get more and more complexity. And so as you can see, this can be a little bit more challenging to implement and to measure. The good news is that the tools that are out there to help with running these types of tests have already built in the technology to manage these tests and make sure that people are seeing each variation the right number of times, and they have the analytics behind the scenes to provide you with the answers that you need. The only caveat that I'll make with multivariate testing is that it is much more difficult to dig in and discover that why behind why something worked better. It's much more focused on just optimization and figuring out what's going to convert at the highest rate. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some examples. And these examples are going to refer to a company X. This is a company that I've worked with in the past and that has graciously agreed to let us use some of some of their experiences to illustrate this. The only condition they gave is that they wanted us to anonymize this enough so that they weren't showing up and so that we weren't giving it away any kind of secrets. And so we've done that. You'll see that some of the examples don't provide as much detail. But it is a real business-to-consumer company. It's a retail company, and the objective of their site is to show their products to consumers and to generate leads to their stores that are located around the country. So for our first example, we're going to talk a little bit about choosing from several different options. And there's rarely a single obvious solution to a design challenge, and setting up an experimentation platform will take the guesswork out of choosing the right one. So for this first example, we're going to look at Company X's product page, and this is a wireframe of their product page. And Company X wanted to experiment with some different ways of presenting contact information to further the conversion from this particular page. They thought there was some opportunity here. This is what their original version looked like of that section of the site. You can see it's fairly simple. There's a large green button. This company has an affinity for buttons when it comes to conversion, and there's a phone number and some location information at the bottom. In terms of what they're trying to optimize here, they weren't necessarily wedded to getting more phone calls or more folks contacting through filling out an online form. They just wanted to generate more contacts overall. So they came up with a couple different ways to potentially do that. So one version that they developed put the location information at the top of the page, put the phone number in the middle and made it a little bit more prominent, and also added a toll-free number and made the green button a little bit smaller and changed the copy on that green button. The second version that they developed put all of the contact options at the top and put the location information at the bottom. And you can see they changed some of the headings to call us, email us, visit us to try and clarify that a little bit more. But you've still got the toll-free number. Under the email us, instead of using the button, they've gone to some specific calls to action that are links instead. And of course, that visit us information is now down at the bottom of the page. So, take a moment, decide which one you think generated the most contacts. The winner in this case was test version 2. And ultimately, it generated 10% more leads from that product page. The way that it did that was something the company was also able to determine. So they saw that having the additional calls to action increased the email web form leads slightly, though the loss of the button limited this effect. It turned out that the button was more effective than the links in terms of getting people to initiate a contact, but having the 3 links and being able to fit those in there instead of the one button ultimately was a slight gain. What really drove most of the increase in those leads and conversions was putting that phone number at the top and including the toll-free number. They found that adding that phone number at the top, that was the consumer's preferred method for contacting their stores. Making that more prominent and giving the extra option ultimately drove more conversions. Okay, let's look at another example. So, just as we talked about before, sometimes building consensus can be difficult. Trying to get everyone to agree on a particular solution without data, it can take time, and you don't always make the right decision. So we're going to look at a situation where there was some issue with arriving at consensus, and the company was able to use testing to get around that. So for this particular example, Company X was looking at some rules for governing partial match search results and merchandising when there were no exact matches to a consumer search on their website. This had been a contentious issue for the company for a while. It was a matter of much debate. Even the president of the company had an opinion where he felt like showing the exact matches outside of the user's search area was a better option than showing those partial matches or near matches within the user's search area. And this debate had been going on for quite some time, but this company was able to adopt a testing platform. Once they had that platform, this was one of the things that they prioritized going out and testing. So for the control, they still had users that were seeing exact matches outside of their search area. For the test, because they had actually done some consumer research recently that suggested that consumers weren't very high on the idea of having a product brought in from outside of their market to their local store, and that they would actually prefer to see alternatives if they were relevant to what the person was looking for. That's how they set it up. They set it up so that they would show partial matches within the person's search area. So in this particular case, who won? Turned out that the test was showing the partial matches increased conversion among these failed searches by 20%, which is really significant. And it turns out that for 95% of the products that Company X was offering, the local recommendations outperformed the control, resulting in more leads and ultimately more sales in the store. They were tracking all the way through to sales. But that's not where they stopped with this. Again, they went one step further, and they looked and were able to see, well, what about that 5% that didn't convert at a higher rate? What can we do with those products? They discovered that those tended to be products that had a higher brand loyalty, and so they were able ultimately to make some changes to their merchandising system so that they could configure on a product-by-product basis which rules kicked in if there were no search results. And they were able to optimize conversion across their entire product line instead of just that 95%. Okay. Let's look at another example, and this one really comes down to being able to take chances on your site and try things that may have some risk, but also mitigate that risk by not just rolling it out to the entire site. And this particular example is one where Company X was looking at giving something away, but that was of value to the consumer, but they had concerns about doing it correctly. So for this example, Company X had access to a type of research report on their product that they could offer to consumers that consumers would normally have to pay for. And the cost was fairly significant. The cost to consumers was $10 to $20 per report, so there was some real value there. But the company was a little bit concerned. The reports were fairly technical. There was some information on there that was open to interpretation by the consumer, and there was concern that consumers would misread the reports, or that if the report said any negative information about the products, that it would keep the consumer from actually moving forward and deciding to purchase a particular product. So they came up with a couple of different ways to try and mitigate that, where they had one option that was providing just a summary of the report online that didn't provide a lot of information. It was more of a teaser, and they would then require the shoppers to go to a retail location, a brick and mortar store, to get a full report on that particular product. Option two was providing the full report online and just seeing what happens. And this is the one that was the most contentious, but because they set up an experiment to do this and they were only showing it to a small portion of their web visitors, they felt like the risk was sufficiently mitigated. Then finally, the last option was making this a lead generation opportunity, requiring shoppers to contact the store or to provide their contact information to a store through the website, and then the store would email them the report and provide a little bit of commentary to help them understand some of the more complex issues that may show up in the report that they may not understand. Let's take a moment, think about which one of these would work out best for the company. And remember, ultimately, their goal is to sell more of their products. So, which one ultimately won? Probably not a big surprise, but providing the full report online with no strings attached increased leads and sales by 8% among those online shoppers. So, what were some of the things that went into ultimately deciding to do that? Well, first of all, because they were collecting the right data, this included not just the conversion data, but they were also collecting voice of the customer data through ongoing surveys on their site that could be tied back to the testing platform they were using. They were able to see there was no evidence of consumers using the report to exclude a product from consideration. And what was interesting is they used that voice of the customer data to then go back and say, okay, well for option 1 and option 3, why didn't they work? And it turned out that consumers felt like option 1 and option 3 were unnecessary barriers to getting the report. And the trouble that they had to go through in giving up their personal information really negated any value that they saw in getting the report. Okay. So let's look at one more example. And this one is really about justifying your web spending. We're going to talk about a situation where Company X was looking at making some enhancements to their website that were going to cost a lot of money, and they needed to know whether or not it was going to be worth the investment before they made that major investment. In this particular situation, Company X was looking at providing better photos to their visitors. And they'd been hearing from visitors for a while that the perception of their photos was that they weren't providing enough photos. They were only providing one product photo, and that the quality of the photos was subpar, especially compared to their competitors. This company wanted to make the investment to improve their photos and was concerned that they were losing out on sales as a result of it, but the cost to put a new process in place for taking those photos and upgrading their equipment and hosting those photos was going to be over $1 million a year. They wanted to understand whether or not they could count on the conversion bump from making this change to their site to pay for this significant investment. And it was going to be an ongoing cost, so it wasn't just a one-time thing. So they came up with their design where they had a higher resolution image and they were providing up to 9 photos of each product instead of just the single lower resolution, lower quality photo. So did it work? I think you know the answer to this by now. It did. And it worked pretty significantly. There was a 5% increase in leads and sales. And when the margin calculation was done on those sales relative to the cost of this program, it was a no-brainer. It was a 1,500% ROI. So they were making $15 for every one that they spent. And the great thing about this is that it not only resulted in them being able to make this change and roll out very quickly, it opened the door for them to look at making future investments in enhancing their photos. As a matter of fact, this became one of their CEO's favorite enhancements to make to the site. He always wanted to know when they were going to do something new for photos because this was so successful. All right. So we're going to pause for a moment now, or at least I'm going to pause, and I'm going to let Peter take over. And Peter is going to show us a little bit about Sitecore and what they offer and why it's relevant to this particular presentation, and actually give us a demonstration of his product. So Peter, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Geoff.
Okay. I'll let you go.
Great. As Charlene mentioned earlier on, I'm the regional director for Sitecore Southeast, so that includes Mid-Atlantic and southeastern part of the U.S. And if you're not familiar with Sitecore, just a real quick introduction. As you can tell from this slide, we really emphasize innovation and are focused, therefore, on research and development that goes back into the product with a specific mindset of helping our customers drive those ultimate goals. You're spending money on online marketing and digital strategies to achieve some sort of goal, revenue, increase subscribers, et cetera. So that's really our focal point. And hopefully you'll see some of that come through as I demonstrate particular features. Obviously from our NASCAR logo slide here, you can tell we've got Thank you, Geoff. You can tell that we've got a lot of interesting customers, many of which you may be familiar with, managing somewhere around 30,000 sites worldwide. And we also are recognized by industry analysts as a leader. One example would be Gartner Group. In their Magic Quadrant, they have ranked us as the only .NET provider that is a leader in their Magic Quadrant, which is a pretty exciting recognition for us to receive. Can you just flip for me, Geoff?
Sure.
A big part of why we have the market position we have and the recognition from industry analysts is the vision that we have for the technology. The way we invest back into the product is to really address the need in the marketplace of an ideal e-business solution. Obviously, testing is part of that, but historically, organizations have found that there are these point business problems, and again, historically have gone out to find best of breed and treated them as very point solutions, which is great, except the problem is that inevitably a marketing person starts wanting to have one point solution talk to another point solution, and at the end of the day, your optimization tool integrated with the content management tool, with your campaign tool, et cetera, you get this ugly spaghetti-looking integration job. And even if you have an unlimited budget in your IT shop to do all of this integration, your marketing team is still going to be unhappy because it's going to be a relatively ugly user experience for them, and you're still going to have 6 or 8 or 10 different systems. So our vision is to have all of these point requirements consolidated down into a platform that is made up of Sitecore and your CRM. Dramatically simplifies your life from an IT point of view, from a marketing point of view, takes all of those different parts of your e-business organization and has an integrated platform so that you can evaluate and adjust. Obviously, testing on your website is a big part of that. So if you want to advance to the next slide, Geoff. When Sitecore talks about testing and specifically about analytics, we don't think that the traditional way of just counting conversions or counting visits is adequate. Geoff mentioned the word value earlier on, and that's really important part of Sitecore's philosophy is we have to measure the value of what you're doing and the value of the results, not just the quantity. So to give you an example with this chart, 4 different campaigns run on a site, and you can see visits versus value. Growing Strong has a significantly higher total volume of visits, but Golden Soil is achieving a much higher value for those visits. So that may mean that the Golden Soil campaign is resulting in more revenue. Another example would be channels. What different channels are you supporting with your digital platform? Obviously, everyone knows search can drive a lot of traffic, and as this diagram illustrates, a lot more traffic than banner ads or email or social, but the value of those visits is generally lower. If you look at email in particular, you're going to get a smaller number of conversions, but the value of those conversions is notably higher than the other channels. And then one last example, screenshot from our dashboard, is looking at it in a different way. This is value over time for 2 different campaigns. And again, you can see that the test campaign is getting higher number of results, but lower value from those results. So let's switch gears and take a look at a demonstration to see what it would be like to administer some tests with Sitecore. And hopefully you should be able to see a browser with the NICAM website. Geoff, can you confirm that you can see that?
Yes.
Excellent. NICAM is a fictitious camera company that Sitecore invented to demonstrate different parts of our product. And right now we're looking at the company page. And let's assume that we're the marketing team and we want to run an experiment. And we'll use this page as the experiment. And we're going to start out with testing background color on our different banners that we might want to have on this site. And what we are seeking is to figure out which of the different background colors we might use is going to perform the best. So we can do that by using our page editor. and I can use the ribbon to simply go into the edit mode for this page. And our interior page design for the NICAM site allows us to put features on the right. So we're going to just add a feature to this right margin and run a test on it. So I'm going to add a new component to the right column. I'm just going to keep it simple. I'll use this generic spot to present some content and run a test. And I have in my content management system a folder that is containing my digital assets for the different tests parameters. And this is going to actually be a multivariate test, not simply an A and a B. We'll start out with 3 variants, and then we'll add a 4th. So I've now added the feature to my page, and you can see it's displaying a white background variant as the default. So now I want to bring up the properties and remove the default and actually, in the test lab, turn on the variance by color test. I'm going to save my page. And I'll go into preview, back into preview mode for this page to simulate that I'm a visitor looking at it in live. And now you can see I have the fantastic D3X banner with a dark gray background. And if I hit F5 to refresh, it will randomly serve up a different variant. Now I have red. And I'll try again, see what else we get. I get gray again, and I'll do one more time. And I get gray again. There's the white you saw earlier. So that's interesting. Let's assume now that we've run this test for a while and our creative design team that Geoff mentioned earlier has been thinking about this for a while, and they've decided that they could come up with a stylized version of this background that is color and stylized for the site. So we want to add that to our test. So I'm just going to switch to my other browser that I have the testing lab in Sitecore, and we're looking at the Sitecore desktop, and I've launched the test lab. And here you can see all the different tests that are set up for this site. And the one that I picked a minute ago is the color variance test. And if I expand the tree, you can see right now I have the 3 variants that we've seen so far. And now I want to add that 4th variant. And this is just to give you an idea of what's involved in managing a test. So let's call this the colorized version. So now it's created the 4th variant, and now I need to give it a source. In other words, I need to point to that asset that the creative team designed for us to test. So I'll go into my repository and look at globals, and it's stored under spots. And there's my multivariate test folder I mentioned a minute ago. And there's our NICAM colorized spot that the design team created for us earlier. I'll save my test. I'm going to tab back over to my preview. And if I hit F5 a couple of times, we should get, I only had to do it once, magic. There's our colorized version. So now I'm running this test with all 4 variants, and I can capture conversions to see which of those styles works the best. So that's pretty interesting. But if you wait 1 second, there's actually more. If I go to my home page, running a simple test of a background color is interesting, but you may want to do something more elaborate for your site. So on my home page, you can see it at the top above my flash feature. I'm running 3 different tests in parallel. On my left, where my mouse is the same test that I'm running on the company page. So that's the fantastic T3X banner with the different random backgrounds. And then in the middle, I'm running a red background banner for the same camera, but here I'm testing the copy. So I have a couple of different variations on the tone of the copy. I have a direct tone, I have a formal tone, and I have an informal tone. And that's interesting. And then you can use that test to determine what sort of style or tone of copy you should be writing for your website to drive the most conversions. And then the third, which is the most interesting, is a more elaborate test. And in this case, I'm not testing so much the banner itself, the background or the copy. I'm actually testing content. I have two different variations for popular content on this site. One is Palau, and the other is the Grand Canyon. So during the test, I'm going to be served up with a spot that is completely different from the other one. The copy will be different, the graphic will be different, and the actual link, you can see if my status bar at the moment is going to articles, places, Palau. If I refresh, I might have to do it a few times here to get the other variant. There we go. Should now see Grand Canyon, as I mentioned, different copy, different imagery, and a different link. And this would be useful for a marketing team that's looking to determine which piece of copy or which piece of content is the most valuable. So that's all interesting from an administrative point of view, but how do you actually use it? How do you determine the value of one of these variations? So let's go back to the desktop, and I'm going to minimize the testing lab. And we can look at the analytics a couple of different ways. The first way I'm going to look at it is in the context of that company page. I want to open up my Explorer here and go to my company page. And I want to see on that page, how did that test perform? And I've actually had that test running on this site for about a week. So let's look at multivariate tests running on that page. Make room here so you can see everything. And what's interesting about the results of this test, you can see that Palau is performing better in terms of total quantity. So 60% of the visitors selected or clicked on Palau versus Grand Canyon. So if I stop there and I simply looked at the quantifiable data, I might choose Palau as my most popular content. But in fact, that's not the real call to action that I'm interested in. Content is just driving some other conversion or some other call to action. And the highest value call to action in NICAM is to actually request a brochure. So if you look at the other goals below those sessions that were completed by those visitors that converted, if I look at Palau, I only have 9% of those visitors are actually requesting a brochure. But if I go to the Grand Canyon and look, I'm actually having a significantly higher, 25% of the Grand Canyon convertees are requesting a brochure. And then they're doing some other interesting things as well. They're selecting a destination, selecting products. So overall, that is a much more valuable test variant. There's other ways with Sitecore that you can measure value. You could do lead scoring. You can do time on page and other things that would be valuable to the marketing team. This is just one example where we're actually showing you the other conversions for that visitor once they've made that conversion. If I go look at the variants by the copy, we'll see a similar story here where we have direct, informal, and polite. And I see that both direct and informal have pretty high levels of total conversions. But again, if I look at polite, I'm not getting quite as high a number of conversions, but I'm getting a significantly higher number of brochures requested than direct, and similar for informal. So then I might want to look at some of the other conversions to decide which of the two is performing the best. And that's about all I have planned for today. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Geoff, for the wrap-up.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. So I've just got a couple more slides and some final thoughts to wrap us up today. I wanted to talk a little bit about how to get started, and there's a few options available to you to start with running experiments on your site, and I think that this is something that's matured significantly over the last 4 years or so, and some of the products are very sophisticated. The great news is that you can use one of the currently available services for experiment design and execution, and there's some pretty easy to use stuff available. Google's Website Optimizer tool, I think, is one of the ones that has the most recognition. It does have the ability to do A/B tests as well as those multivariate tests that we talked about. Pretty easy to get started with as well. So that's one option that's open to you. There are more advanced tools, such as Adobe's Test and Target, if you use some of their other suite of products, like their Site Catalyst analytics tools. It plugs in nicely with those. There's also other products like SiteSpec. These allow for more advanced configurations. They can also help with marketing, experimentation, and testing off your site, where you're doing different types of display advertising or even search advertising. And they tend to integrate with other systems fairly well, such as any sort of search appliance that you have, merchandising tools, and even surveys that you may be running. Another option is if you have a content management system, see if they offer an integrated testing option. Sitecore is a great example, and I think that some of the other content management solutions that are out there offer some type of functionality for conducting tests as well. The other option is you can roll your own. You can build this into any sort of major functionality changes that you're making. You can set up your own system. It will take more time, but some sites do have more specialized needs based on the way that the site is set up, their architecture, or just the types of experiments that they want to run. Just know that that's maybe a longer path to doing this, and that there are some more quick hit ways that you can get up and running with it right away. Some last thoughts. These are just some additional things to keep in mind as you get started. I think first and foremost, there's probably a lot of things that you would want to test, but for the biggest bang and to get the most out of it, I recommend focusing on points of conversion or at least high traffic areas of your site. Those are the places where you're going to be able to collect the most data, and you're going to see the most benefit, not just in terms of being able to get an accurate read on your test, but any of the changes that you would be making in those areas are going to have the biggest potential impact on your conversion. Make sure that you're testing often, and that as you're doing your testing, you're trying something, you're learning from it, then you go back and you test again. Make it iterative. Make it something that's a part of your process. And if you have an agile development environment, this is a great way to kind of fit that in. Get something out there, try it, go with the winner, take what you learn, go back and do some more work. This one I think is important. If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. The idea there is that you should be taking risks. You should be trying things that you want to understand better. And so if every test that you do is a success, then in my book you're not really trying hard enough, and you're not trying every possible option. So I would recommend extending yourself, trying things that you may personally believe won't work, but someone else does believe will work. And even if it doesn't work, you'll learn something from it. At the same time, while you're doing all this testing, and I know this goes against those last couple, but it is important to make sure that you're finding things that you have a reason to test. Ideas that you think have merit either through some sort of research you've done or some past testing that you've done, or something where you feel like there's a strong justification for doing it. You don't just want to make a change for the sake of making a change. Dancing penguins may not be the right thing to try on your homepage. Just because you can think of it doesn't mean you should put it up there. And finally, don't just pick your winner. Try to learn why it performed best. And this is getting back to making sure that you have those analytics tools in place and that they're well integrated with your testing platform, so that you can not only see which version ultimately resulted in the highest conversion and the best possible outcome, you can understand why it performed better, and you can look at the different segments of your traffic that you tend to look at and see where it performed better. You'll learn some really interesting things, and that'll help inform future tests and help you to implement it in the best possible way. Avinash Kaushik, who's sort of a rock star in the analytics community, is a big fan of experimentation, and this is his quote on testing and experimentation, that you need to experiment or die. There is no try. If you have a site today, if it's a significant part of your company's strategy and their presence with your customers, you need to have a testing culture in place. You need to be doing continuous optimization. Otherwise, you're missing out on opportunities to get more conversions, to get more registrations, to get those things that for your site are important. So that's all I had to share. I'll turn it back over to Charlene at this time.
Well, we did receive one question. I'd like to go ahead and put that out there for you guys. And then in the interest of time, if anyone else has questions as a follow-up, please email events@ironworks.com, and we promise to respond to you. That's events, EVENTS, @ironworks.com. So our question is, Geoff, our company doesn't have a large staff in marketing or design. How do we manage testing with a limited staff?
That's a good question. You do have to have someone who is in a position to utilize these tools, and it's usually going to end up being the person who is handling the analytics for your group. I find that in most organizations, that's where the expertise exists to help to configure these tests. But having a small team presents multiple challenges. I think that having someone who has the time to set up these tests and even just creating the different versions of something so you can go out and test it can be a challenge. So it may be more that you're focused less on setting up these tests with 3, 4, 5 versions of something, but maybe you just start out with each time that you're introducing something new on the site, you're making some change to your content that you think may have an impact on conversion, that you use these testing tools then to just assess the impact and learn from that. And it's a little bit slower process, but it is still iterative, and you can use that to fine-tune your approach and figure out what's going to generate the most conversion. As far as getting set up and getting started with it, the tools that I mentioned, if you have a content management system that has it built in, it'll probably be very easy once you go in and learn how to use that. The tools like Google's Website Optimizer will take just a little bit of configuration to get it up and running, but once you have it up and running, you should be able to administer those tests fairly easily, and the tools are fairly intuitive. Hopefully that answers your question. If you have any follow-ups, feel free to email me or email the events@ironworks.com email address, and I'll be happy to discuss it with you further.
One other quick question, if we have time for it. Does testing work with emails as well as it does just for websites?
So absolutely, and I should mention that this type of testing didn't come about just from the web. This is the type of thing that direct marketers have been doing for years, and database marketers. And it works just as well for things like direct mail as it does for email marketing and for your website. You can test different versions of a particular mailer. You can try it with different audiences. As a matter of fact, I would recommend that every time you're doing any sort of email marketing effort, that you're doing some kind of testing along with it, that you're not just doing one particular message and just pushing that to everyone.
Geoff, I'll just pile on a little bit. That's a big part of Sitecore's value proposition in having an integrated suite where you are able to not only test an email for open rates, but because it's part of the same platform, you can test which of the open rates, which of the variants gave you the best open rate, but then ultimately convert it to visitors that actually bought something because you have that analytic that's doing the whole round trip measurement of what's going on.
Great. If there are no more questions for the floor today, I'd like to thank everyone for your participation in our webinar today. We'll be making the full presentation recording and the slide deck available as a link from ironworks.com by tomorrow. Just check out our news and events page and look for the event title there. That'll be posted again by tomorrow. Thank you for participating, everyone, and have a great day.